The Ember Wolves do not shirk from the fight. For we are ferocity, made metal. The doom of mightier machines. We bring gods to their armored knees.
Of the literally hundreds of Titan legions founded between the Legio Titanicus' mysterious founding during the Age of Strife and the breakout of what would eventually become known as the Horus Heresy, the Ember Wolves of the Legio Audax are perhaps the most easily recognisable. Not for any gaudy heraldry or enormity of their war engines towering over a battlefield, but for perhaps the opposite. Amongst the legions of warlords, warmasters and imperators, one might think the Ember Wolves a lesser threat with their relatively smaller god machines. One might think that, if not for the very truth of their common name. A pack of wolves, organised and vicious enough, can take down prey of almost any size. And a single ember can burn down entire empires. Relatively soon after the alliance was forged between Terra and the Mechanicum of Mars, the Emperor himself found his great plan to, establish rule over the entire galaxy was a bit big of a bite to chew. Even with his myriad genetic and biomechanical projects, Astartes, Custodes, even the potential of the Webway, he was not too big yet to admit he could do with some help. And his new allies on Mars were more than happy to oblige. For a sizable commission, of course. The Emperor requested the founding of a dozen or so brand new Titan legions. The first legions developed directly under his orders, and the first legions explicitly allied to the Imperium, and thereby Terra, rather than the Mechanicum and Mars. This edict was communicated to Forge Worlds across the Milky Way, each producing Titans and training crews at a rate never before seen in the history of the Legio Titanicus. Mars itself threw all its resources into the forging of Warhound-class Scout Titans. Seen by a majority of Titan legions as chaff, smaller god engines used for the missions that weren't even worth risking a Reaver maniple, this new Martian legion took advantage of the relatively smaller size of the components and crew to produce numbers of viable active engines that would make even the oldest Titan legions think maybe that's a little excessive. The Red Planet burned with the fires of the Forge and produced the red and iron armies of the Legio Audax, the Ember Wolves. Although envisioned by the Emperor as an expeditionary force, under his full control and expendable at that, after all, that's what he had paid for and what warhounds are supposed to be. Some enterprising Martian had other ideas. It is unclear whether a spark of early warp-touched darkness noticed the burgeoning ferocity in the wolves and wanted to get its claws in early, or whoever was on admin that day just didn't get the memo. But someone on Mars assigned the Legio Audax a standard template construct, filled with the schematics and intelligence needed to establish a new Forge world of their own, and, at last, add larger Titans to their ranks, establishing Audax as a legitimate Mechanicum-compliant Titan Legion. Explorator arcs filled to the brim with supplies accompanied the void ships on their journey, should a new world be found, and a Forge founded. This promise of a home and increased status from their homeworld compared with their limited scope in the eyes of the Emperor, their two founders conflicted on their path, established a dichotomy in their loyalties from the very moment they left Mars, not really feeling a belonging to Mars or Terra, outsiders from the very start. As one of the Emperor's own Legios, the Ember Wolves found themselves sent all across the galaxy, wherever the fighting was thickest. Eager not to be seen as lesser by the larger Titan crews, the Wolves earned their name by working in close cohesion. An Audax Warhound was seldom seen on its own, and in fact, if one ever thought themselves lucky enough to be faced with just one, then it meant at least another 2 more were lying in wait, ready to pounce. The idea of a Titan hiding or pouncing might seem bizarre, but somehow the wolves managed it. Communication between princeps was almost psychic, so intuitive they were able to hunt in packs and adapt to any battlefield. They became renowned, especially for their Canis Light Maniple, 5 veteran warhounds who were so in sync they truly fought as one, and could take down foes many times their size through the art of the hunt. During their time assigned to the 13th Expeditionary Fleet of the Great Crusade, their ferocious, frankly cruel nature became stuff of legends. Their insistence not to be outdone by their larger brothers resulted in overcompensation with regards to the destruction and violence they caused. They were not to be underestimated, and that meant they were to be feared. Every battle to which they were sent resulted in the complete annihilation of the opponent, and the Emperor knew this. They were reserved for when diplomacy simply was no longer an option, and complete and utter annihilation was required. This ferocity fed their reputation, and this reputation fed their ferocity, and each was solidified by 2 key events in the Legio's early history. First, 10 years after their founding, a conflict with the Xenos Voidslingers of the Zasla Empire resulted in the irreparable corruption of the STC, which was the Ember Wolves' plans and promise of someday greater godbeasts, limiting their eventual promised Forge World only to those models already in service, namely the Scout-level Titans, the Rapier, Direwolf, and, most common by far, the Warhound. Records note a significant increase in the brutality of the Ember Wolves following this event, and very shortly after the attack, the Zlasla Empire appeared to have been wiped off the face of the galaxy entirely. Rumours abound that this was the Legio Audax taking vengeance on the race which had slighted them so, though, of course, with no survivors, this was never confirmed. The second event, or more accurately, series of events, was during the Lorin Alpha campaign, which, following the Legio Audax's deployment to the front line, quickly became known as the Lorin Alpha Massacres. Cities and cities of quite probably redeemable and certainly not condemnable rebel humans completely obliterated, entire cultures razed to the ground. As the princeps of the Legio Audax requested a replacement for their STC patterns to rewrite their directive to find and colonize new worlds in the name of the Mechanicum, Mars outright refused, using the loss of their ark to disown them completely. The Mechanicum would no longer supply materials, schematics, or information to the disgraced Legion. And so far as the Emperor was concerned, as his lapdogs, they should never have been given the directive under Mars to begin with. Voices throughout the Imperium and the Mechanicum alike called for the complete dissolution of the Legio Audax, to have their princeps stripped of their ranks, their Titans decommissioned and scrapped for parts to supply other, more amenable legions. And for a time, it seemed like this was their fate. The Wolves' short but bloody history at an end. Or it would have been, save for a strange final decision from the Terran War Council. After all, the Ember Wolves were not under the control of Mars. Their fate was the decision of Terra. And, for some reason known only to the tightest members of the War Council, notably including the War Master himself as the right hand of the Emperor, the Ember Wolves were not decommissioned, but banished, just in case their ferocity was ever needed again. And if it wasn't, the lack of a Forge World, no schematics or intelligence to establish one, and outright rejection from the Mechanicum for any other Forge World to resupply or repair any of their 90-odd god engines, they would eventually just run out, dry up. They would live in exile until their inevitable, natural end. And this would have been the case, if it weren't for the world they were exiled to. A world not only for a Titan Legion, lacking allegiance and direction, brushed under the carpet for being too brutal and unpredictable, but kept just in case, but a world called Bot, a destination that could only have been decided by a certain War Master, with a certain ulterior motive, under communication with certain ruinous powers. A world which was already being used as the home for a legion of Astartes, with almost the exact same profile. Isolated, dispossessed, directionless save for point and destroy. Perceived savages, kept from the more civilized elements of the Imperium, but on standby, just in case a target really needed eliminating. And giving that legion, and their Primarch, a century of lost and angry Titans just waiting to be adopted into a loving home. For someone to understand, to need them, to want them without reticence, relishing in all they are and could be, not ashamed, but proud to fight alongside them. That would define the direction of both legions, Titan and Astartes, into the millennia to follow. End of part 1. Thank you everyone for watching, trying a new format, build and lore together for some of my reposey projects. What did you think? I've got at least one more Audax video to finish off the Canis Light Maniple, and then I also want to do a Bane Lords of Legio Vulpe and the conflicted origins of Legio Mortis. And if I get enough subs, a solo video on the DS ERI itself, using bits from basically all the kits to create the first traitor Imperator Titan. I hope that sounds fun. Let me know in the comments. Like and share this video. Thank you to all my Patreons, especially newbies, Silent Paladin and Phoenix of Metal. And keep on lit bashing.